Well, my name's Ross Phillips, and I am pretty much an artist. I have been my whole life. And I fell into spiritual seeking pretty heavily in my adolescence. And it led me to a lot of Advaita teachings, mostly from Ramana Maharshi. There was a deep resonance there. And so I followed that. And yeah, it led to a particular shift, some could say. And that's pretty much the whole gist of it. There used to be a ton of self-reflexivity. So like a lot of second guessing and questioning, who is the one that's authoring the actions? There used to be a lot of like internal dialogue like that of like who is making this body move. And before I even knew what meditation was, I was basically meditating and just closely observing the nature of how actions unfold and just deeply contemplating the nature of self before I was even aware that that was like a thing that people do. And yeah, it led to self-inquiry naturally. And I think that's what the resonance was with Ramana Maharshi's teachings, because yeah, it's this deep silence that you come about, that there's not really a particular separate center to the experience. There's not really an author to the action in the ultimate sense. It's, yeah, a pretty profound thing. In my late 20s, so like in 2020, I believe I might have been like 28 years old. There were plenty of like subtle insights and glimpses along the way to spiritual seeking. But then I suddenly had this spontaneous spiritual experience where Ramana Maharshi appeared in my apartment I was living in at the time. And he basically put me into a state of samadhi, and the room and the body, everything just dissolved into an ocean of unimaginable bliss. And ever since then, you can't really unsee it. It's just this obviousness that that bliss is the substratum of everything. Everything is a manifestation of that.
Are people ready for that? I like if Ramana shows up here, I might be scared. I might like think, what's happening? I mean, how could you deal with it? Ramana is, they call him dad. Yeah, usually around
The
here.
body is technically dead, yeah.
Yes, the body is dead, and then he shows up in your place. That sounds like a very psychotic story,
Yeah,
How
yeah.
and you're talking open about it. So can you talk about it, or?
I had to wait a few years to be able to like speak about it to other people. Um, it's interesting though. I don't really have a history of hallucinating or anything. Like that's not just a thing that happens. And I was completely sober when this happened. I just got back home from like an ordinary day at work. This was after the lockdowns from COVID and everything. And I just got home from work and I was thinking, ordinary thoughts. This was after I had been learning a lot about the life of Ramana Maharshi, and I was actually taking a break from spiritual seeking. So I was in that phase where you completely give up. I decided to just go back to living ordinary life. And then that's when it happened. I put my stuff down when I get home and lay on my bed. And then I look over and there's the most crisp, vivid hallucination of Ramana Maharshi laying right next to me. And there was almost this instantaneous telepathic communication happening where I suddenly was aware of what my innate nature is without any words. It was completely non-conceptual, almost like just a transmission of beingness or wisdom. And he reached over and touched my arm, and that's when everything dissolved into this ocean of bliss. And the sense of time dissolved as well, but at some points the room was appearing again, and the body was appearing again, and I look over and he's still there. And there's this telepathic communication happening again. He was basically asking if I wanted to experience that again. And it's weird to call it an experience, because it's really the absence of experience. It's just your innate beingness without the manifestations disguising it. So he was asking me if I wanted to undergo that again, and I consented. So he touched my arm again, and it was the exact same ocean of bliss. And then when I came back to again and I was back in the room, then he was gone. And for a few weeks following this, I felt completely ecstatic, like I was floating. And then that sort of dissipated and mellowed out back into the ordinariness.
Well, I think we can stop now. That's not gonna happen. And also, like, even like me sitting here and asking questions and then please let me know and stuff. It's as I understand, it's like not really helping. You're telling me like Rebecca Dawson. She had like the same thing that the moment she let go, she said, "Bah, I forget
Yeah.
about it."
Yeah, it's when the mind stops trying to force it that your innate being is just, it becomes obvious when you're not trying to hide it with all the effort of the ego, trying to make something happen. When that stops, when the ego stops trying to make it happen, then it just ushers in effortlessly.
But on the other hand, I mean, you had many years. You made maybe great effort of
Well, yeah,
thinking and kind of like doing stuff.
yeah, it's funny to talk about because it's so unconditional, and some people have these experiences without spiritual seeking, without knowing anything about it. But I did have, a history of meditating and doing psychological work and really trying to find something called enlightenment. So that was, the back history here. So it's tricky to say, is that necessary or not? I can't really speak on that.
And then you had this experience, and maybe you were such in a state of bliss, there was not really anything to do, I guess, no? Or did you feel, I mean, then immediately Ramana said, okay, here's the list, start teaching others, talk about it.
Well, when I came back to, it took a while to really process what just happened. And I also left out this little detail. It felt more real than real, the waking state. It felt more real than this. And the only way I know how to relay that to other people is, how when you go to sleep at night and you have a dream, when you're in the dream, it seems somewhat real. You're convinced that that's reality, unless you're lucid. And then when you wake up and you realize that was just a dream, then this waking state feels more real than that dream. So that shift of a higher degree of realness, it was like that, except multiply it times 100,000. But yeah, back to your question of what to do after that. Yeah, I just went back to living ordinary life. And I went a few years without really talking about it with anyone.
You have like a YouTube channel, and there you talk, and very
Mhm.
interesting points of view,
Yeah.
kind of scientific. It's beautiful to listen to that, because like for the mind is like, yes, okay, now I get it.
Yeah.
But where's the energy? Where's the drive coming from to do that?
I suppose I could just sum it up to an authentic passion. There's certainly not a need for it in the ultimate sense. And what I notice many people assume is if there's no need for something, then therefore it can't happen. That's not necessarily the case. There's no need for it, and therefore there's the freedom for it to happen or not. And, it's just what seems to be happening. So there's not really like a personal drive to make it happen because it needs to happen or whatever. It's just a passion. It's just following that inner pull of just this is the way.
Do you have also sometimes one-on-one talks, like people come to you, you know, I have this desire, I want this car, can you help me?
Not at the moment. No, I haven't really felt the pull to do one-on-one conversations. As for now, I'm just doing the YouTube videos.
Okay, so you're not like renting a place and gathering people and
No,
organizing events.
no, it's funny because, I actually in daily life I actively avoid attention. I very much keep to myself. So I feel this pull to make these videos and to talk about this stuff, but I really have a pretty low limit for encountering other people in person and like giving everyone my attention like up front like that. So I just have like that pull to make the videos, but I don't want it to be more than that for now.
You should be careful, you know, maybe change your hair when you go outside, people could recognize you.
Yeah. I get a lot of comments though. Yeah.
Yes, okay. What about the hair, I guess?
Yeah. All the Jesus comments.
Okay, and you have the picture, like people want to grab something, no? Like
Yeah.
they want to pull something out of the video. Okay, I get
Mhm.
that. Yeah, all right. Wow, that's really cool. Well, no more questions. I don't know. There's no exercise to make that happen. I don't know where to start, you know? I don't know.
Yeah, it's not really like a prescriptive thing, but there was a lot of self-inquiry happening here. So, throughout the day, for pretty much every day, whenever anything seemed to be happening or like a thought arises, rather than indulging into the content of that experience, the attention would be reversed onto the source of that experience. It would be looking for the one that it's arising to. And, with self-inquiry, there's not really supposed to be an answer that comes up. Naturally, the question, who am I, is met with the answer, me. I am me. But, that's just more concepts. Who's aware of those concepts? It's really just meant to dissolve the idea that there is a questioner, that there is someone at the center of the experience. It's this obviousness that comes about that there isn't anyone. There's only this undivided substratum appearing as everything.
I mean, for me, it's so easy to say, you know, we are one.
Mm.
Everything is love. Here, I said it. So, and that's what it is. But, and then,
Yeah, and as far as like, trying to make it happen and everything and like recommendations, it is tricky because, maybe self-inquiry doesn't work for some people. So I can only really say what worked here, or at least what seemed to work here. And, if someone resonates with that method, they can try it. But if it's not working, there's nothing wrong with picking up a different method and going with that. Just whatever the individual resonates with, that's fine to go with.
but maybe eventually some people, you're talking about that, and I don't know, hey, mom, I saw Ramana now, and I think we are one. Maybe you get like scolded, you know, they say, no, go back, do your scores. No, I mean, do you have some resistance? People are getting angry when you talk to them about what is really happening.
I don't speak about it so much in like daily life circumstances, unless people ask. But as far as like content on the internet goes, like in the comment sections, there are people that, occasionally come through and they get angry at the idea of everyone's innate beingness being the same. They think it is arrogant or narcissistic. And, that's just a misunderstanding of what's being said, because it only sounds arrogant or narcissistic when you say that you are exclusively the substratum. But there's not really that exclusivity. It's an equal playing field. So it's actually humbling. to acknowledge that, the ego doesn't really exist as an exclusive agent.
Do you engage in communication, like you respond to these comments on your YouTube channel?
Yeah, sometimes if I can gauge if the person is being genuine, then I'll entertain their questions. Yeah.
Okay, that's very nice from you.
There's just a passion for clarity, transparency, I guess. So if people have questions and I can tell that they mean well, that they're really trying to grok what's being said, then yeah, I'm more than happy to clarify things if I can.
So you could say your personality changed from before to what you are now or what you are not now?
There's just been a very subtle shift. The way that it seems here is it's sort of a gradual clearing away of karmic attachments and everything. Even after enlightenment or self-recognition, there might still be some uh, like personal attributes that people would deem as negative, like maybe impatience. Like there might still be a window after enlightenment for that to clear out. So it's not like an automatic thing where you're just instantly a different person. So there's still, particular patterns of behavior that stick around. And part of the recognition is accepting those things that maybe were considered undesirable or negative. It's through the accepting of that's included too.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I like that. I was in some contact with a Dzogchen master, and of course, you would expect, oh, this guy is holy, maybe he's enlightened, and he should like float at least like 10 centimeters over, floating around or something,
At least,
and then. Yeah, and then I see him, with his closest followers, and they're sitting in the hotel room and drinking whiskey. And in another instant, like he was teaching to the people, and eventually he got very angry. He said, "Oh, you're not following my advice. What are you doing, you lazy bastards?" And I
yeah,
was surprised. I thought, wow, this is not what I expect from a holy person.
it's funny, yeah. The ordinary stereotype of quote spiritual people or whatever is that they never get angry, or if they do, there's some contradiction with that. But the anger is included as well. It's the difference is not identifying with what's happening. So anger can arise, and there's no contradiction so long as there's no one identifying as being angry. It's just anger.
I have this one favorite topic. It is actually death. Because somehow, I don't know why, but it makes things interesting. Because when the idea of death comes along, then it kinds of motivate myself to investigate. What is this? What's happening? And then we die. Why? What's happening? What is your point of view of the event of death? Are you still afraid?
No, fear can certainly still arise, so like a body doesn't want to experience pain. So fear of like a painful death could arise, but like death itself, as in like the ending to a particular pattern of experience, that doesn't seem to be a fear anymore. There's just this obviousness that what everyone truly is this aliveness, which doesn't really come or go. It's just changing shapes, changing forms. So death is just a difference in pattern, really.
Was it different before? Like you had more of a kind of fear of death, or
Yeah,
did there
the
change
the fear
something?
was, yeah, the fear was from an uncertainty about it. The mind that wants to know, it's afraid of uncertainty, of not knowing, because there's just too much ambiguity within that. It wants to know what's going to happen so it can feel secure. So yeah, there used to be that fear of death, but more so than the fear of death, there was an interest in it. just a deep interest in death or existence itself. Like, why is anything appearing at all? So there was a deep curiosity to figure that out. And I think that trumped the fear of death. I was more interested in what it is.
Oh, you used the word trumped.
I could have used stifled.
Yeah, you're good. But then, so then Ramana Maharshi, he shows up and he's kind of pretty much dead, as one would say. If I'm still attached to time, then I would say, yeah, well, this is 2000 something, and he was gone long time ago. So, do you have proof there is the spiritual world? There's these spirits still being there on the other side playing golf.
The way that I see it is, it's not that Ramana Maharshi as a separate person still exists. His innate beingness is the undivided substratum. How I interpret that experience is this mind projected an image that it could associate with the ineffability of this undivided substratum. It's the formlessness that it doesn't really have an intrinsic form to it. So for the mind to try to know it, it has to project something familiar onto it. And here that was the image of Ramana Maharshi. But for someone else, it could be an image of Krishna or Jesus or the Buddha, anyone. It's whatever the individual seeker resonates with.
So he's just a reflection of your beliefs or your interests. So if I would be like a hardcore Catholic, then it would be Jesus
Yeah.
coming up, showing up. All right.
Yeah.
And is so this is kind of a contact with the spiritual world, I would say. And then there's these people, they like yeah, they sell themselves as I'm a channeler, and then they have these entities talking through them. And what is your point of view about all of this? I mean, are you listening to one of these or?
I've seen what you're talking about, and I have, there has been the impression of accessing particular realms and basically speaking this stuff to other beings. But I don't really stay there or identify with it too much, and I don't really, I suppose, what was the word?
Channeling.
Channeling, yeah. I don't channel for other beings. Yeah. Because ordinary people seem to gather that beings in other realms must be more enlightened than they are. And that's not necessarily the case. They can be just as much mired in attachments and illusions. They just happen to be in another realm. So channeling things from other beings, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's more true about reality.
Then some people, I like music, so then we talk about vibrations, harmony, disharmony, and a lot of people, they love to mention this. Oh, no, now I'm different, my vibration is higher. Or
Yeah.
you're vibing very low, you should better take care. So, do you have an opinion about that?
It's funny because spiritual seeking usually begins with striving to get to those higher frequencies and to stay positive all the time. And here I sort of came around and, went through that acceptance thing where you appreciate the negative frequencies just as much. And so there's not really a hierarchy to it per se. Obviously, an individual organism has its conditioned preferences to maintain homeostasis and prefer positivity, and that's fine in itself. But in the absolute sense, there's not really any better or worse to it. The way that I see it is the intrinsic beingness, the undivided substratum, it's like the equilibrium of a frequency wave. So just that flat, straight line with no excitations, and everything arises from that, the positives and the negatives. So spirituality to me isn't about staying positive all the time. It's finding your true intrinsic nature of being as that equilibrium and allowing everything to come and go as it does.
Maybe some people they come to you and say, "Okay, you have got to save us. You know, poverty, war, pain. Stop it. You know something. You know something more. You must stop it for us. Join the fight."
There's not really an absolute should or shouldn't to it, but in the relative sense, as far as human activity goes, there is a should and a shouldn't. We would all agree, well, not all of us, but hopefully most people would agree, like violence is bad. It's something that shouldn't happen. So, there's no rejection for those preferences, the human preference to want peace and well-being for everyone. So trying to help happens, but it doesn't become too serious. It's not seen as something that absolutely needs to happen because ultimately no one is suffering. Everyone's true state of being is perfect peace, and it never really stops being that. It just becomes disguised by these illusions of the world events. So, yeah, there's nothing wrong with trying to help people, but it's not so serious at the same time.
Well, there's a lot of people out there. They say, "Well, we gotta fight for freedom. We gotta do it. You know, take the weapon and make them peaceful."
Yeah. Yeah, there's certainly a lot of good that could come from, people sharing their faith and everything, their perspective. I think people will find a lot of common ground that way. And, they won't stay in an echo chamber where they're just fed, other ideas about other people and other religions that probably aren't true. So yeah, engaging with other religions in that way is probably pretty healthy. Yeah, and avoiding that seems to come from an insecurity that maybe people are afraid that they'll hear something that changes their mind and they're just scared of that for whatever reason. So yeah, I think a lot of growth could come from that for sure. Yeah, since that experience, I have found that I can find a lot of agreements between other religions and the ways that people express it. I think maybe everyone's just trying to explain something that is purely ineffable. You can't really explain it. So there's just all these different attempts to explain it. And I can see where a lot of people are coming from, especially with the Christian mystics now. I really read what Meister Eckhart wrote, and it has a deep resonance now. Whereas before, I just had a bias against it. I guess it just seemed like complete nonsense. But that's because I was only reading it literally. But I think maybe in an allegorical sense, there's a lot of wisdom to be found in religions like Christianity or Islam or Taoism. I think they're all trying to get at the same thing, probably.
It seems like you and your life had a lot of exercise with that thing they call the brain. I'm pointing here because I don't know. Some people say it's there, whatever. But so, do you have also this other part? It's like called like devotional. Like you go and you have like a little altar of Ramana, and then you prostrate or you do some mantras or whatever.
No, there isn't really a devotional aspect to it. Um, I grew up in a Christian home and I never really believed Christianity, literally. So I eventually left it altogether. I stopped trying to fit the mold when I clearly didn't. And then I went through atheism for a while. And so I approached spirituality from more of an atheistic perspective. And it wasn't very devotional in that way. It was just truth seeking without that aspect of duality to it. I suppose you could say that there was devotion to Ramana Maharshi, but it wasn't like worshiping or praying in that kind of sense of the word. It was just following his teachings. And Ramana Maharshi himself said, the highest form of devotion to him is if you just do the practice.
Some people, they might resonate with that, like, oh, if I think enough, if I read enough books, if I collect a lot of knowledge and then I top it up, even I'm looking for people, they teach me more, then I get there. Is that necessary? What would you recommend?
No, so I'm naturally left hemisphere dominant and very intellectual, and I enjoy intellectualizing it, even though you can't really grasp it with concepts. I like trying to distill it in the form of analytical information, even though that's not ultimately what it is. To me, it's just the creative expression that's what it looks like is intellectualizing sometimes. But you certainly don't need to go through that path of intellectualization. Um, you can appreciate it as a manifestation of the undivided as anything else, but it's not intrinsically that. So, reading all of these books and learning the spiritual concepts, it's all good fun, but it's not necessary in the ultimate sense. The last words would just be to learn to notice the silence behind the words. So the words themselves, see that they're not really that important. They're emanating from something much deeper and profound, and it never really goes away. It's always here, sort of in the background of experience, patiently waiting to be noticed. And that's it.